Workforce and workplace norms are shaped as much by popularized portrayals as they are by our lived experiences. From sensational headlines, like The Great Resignation, to successful series, like The Office and Silicon Valley, to skits and stories shared on our social media feeds, what we see shapes what we believe. Let's go behind the scenes to discover what's new now and next in the world of work, and we'll challenge the traditions of what it means to live well and to work well. This is Success from Anywhere.
Today on Success from Anywhere, we'll meet an award-winning entrepreneur, catalyst, and author whose transformational impact on the workplace resulted in being knighted in her native France. Please join me in welcoming to the show author of Dare to Unlead, The Art of Relationship Leadership in a Fragmented World, the one woman who truly knows whether or not the pen is mightier than the sword, Celine Schillinger. Welcome to the show, Celine.
Thank you, Karen. I'm so excited to be here.
Everyone listening wants to know, how do you get knighted and what was the experience like?
It was amazing. So I'm not riding a horse, with it's not that kind of knighthood. It happened a few years ago when I was still living in the US. It was in Boston. And I was knighted upon the recommendation of the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs for my involvement in diversity in the workplace. So I had been an activist for diversity in the workplace for quite some time already, and I guess this has been noticed, and it was completely unexpected. I really discovered that by chance, and it was amazing. It was such an honor, and I celebrated with my friends and family in Boston. It was amazing.
Did you get a sword, a sash, a tiara? I mean, just a trophy? How does that
I
work?
got I got I got a medal, a beautiful medal. I think it's sitting not far away from me. It's blue and quite big. That's it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, because we are talking about the world of work, I like to ask each guest, what was your first paid 9 to 5 job, and how did that job influence your career trajectory?
Oh, that's a great question. So my first 9 to 5 job was in France in a small startup in a tech company working mostly with Chinese clients and led mostly by people of Vietnamese origin. So something a little bit unusual. One of the founders is considered as one of the inventors of one of the first ever microcomputers. Its name was the Micral. I think it's at the Museum of Computers, and I was in what it really led. I didn't stay that long in that company because it was very small and fragile, and it actually closed down about a year and a half after I joined. But it added to my Asia bug. I was passionate about Asia for through literature and the arts and cinema, and working with Asian customers at that time really reinforced that appetite. And I ended up leaving France and moving to Vietnam, settling down in Vietnam in a Vietnamese family, learning the language, and spending 4 beautiful years there finding a job. And that led me to other jobs in relation to Asia. Later on settled in China to lead the radio business of a French media company. So overall, that first job was the entry door to 10 beautiful years in Asia with Asian customers. Went to Japan also quite a bit, and other countries. And it's still very, very deep in my heart. I've considered Vietnam as my second country almost. I used to speak the language pretty well at that time. It's now long forgotten, unfortunately, but I still have friends, and I've been very marked by the culture and the aesthetics and the food, many, many things.
You're leading this diverse perspective of work from having lived it, which is a little bit unusual, right? I mean, you've already told us this few minutes into the conversation about living in France and the United States and Vietnam and
Yeah.
traveling everywhere. And that makes me wonder, I mean, given the cultural context in which you've operated,
Mm.
what opportunities do you believe the COVID pandemic
Ah.
opened up for us to reinvent 9 to 5 globally, not just in a specific country?
Yes, I mean, this is the question of our times, right? And between the pandemic and what I just told you, this extreme diversity of experience, I joined a large pharmaceutical company in Europe and discovered the super traditional 9 to 5, and found good aspects in it. There were things I really loved in it, and things I resented very deeply. And the pandemic has shaken all that completely for all of us. I was already out of that company. I had already settled my own business at that time, so I was already working on my own, working with, from my house, and using, all sorts of digital networks. So it was not a complete shock for me. I was not, pushed away from a collective of colleagues, from one day to another, like what happened to many, many people. But I could see the amount of change. It was considered as almost as a revolution as compared to what we did. And I feel that the pandemic has brought to light some frustrations and even aberrations that were already here, but that were sort of in a muted state. Like we were like the frog that has been put in cold water and heated progressively, and so we had not, I think we were not all aware of the aberrations of our operating mode. And yet there were plenty of warning signs, like the number of burnouts, the burnout epidemics, or the employee disengagement, for example. So there were already, warning signs, but it was, I think, awareness was not generalized. And the pandemic has forced us to take a distance from those classical operating modes, and to see how we were working, and the waste of energy, the waste of time, the waste of even wasting people, the waste of human creativity, in the traditional 9 to 5. So I think it was, yes, it's a shock. It's still, people are still mourning, I guess. Many of them are still mourning the 9 to 5. There were things we loved there, right? The camaraderie, the sort of the work bubble, which is great for focus, or the change of scenery, or but there were also things that were completely toxic. And now is a really great time to distance ourselves and reinvent or invent new ways to work together as a collective. So the opportunities, I think, are precisely related to reinventing a form of collective performance that fits our human aspirations in the 21st century, and that fit also the economic, environmental conditions of our century.
When you were working in that very traditional, as you called it, 9 to 5 at the pharmaceutical company, you were inspired to become an employee activist.
Yeah.
How do you define that, and what inspired you to start a movement? I mean, take us inside of how you rose up inside of that traditional environment to lead change.
Mm. To be really honest, I was an accidental activist. I didn't think about it in the beginning. It didn't happen like that. I just got progressively, and possibly because of that love for diversity in the first place, and that extreme, those first 10 years spent in a extremely diverse and entrepreneurial and fast-moving kind of world, progressively, I think I became like suffocated by the lack, precisely the lack of diversity in my workplace, which was great in many aspects, but extremely dull and uniform, and it was just, I mean, there was a single model of guys basically at all echelons of power, and that was all. And beside that model, there were no hope for anybody else, not fitting in the mold. So at some point, I realized it was not just an individual issue, a personal issue, or an issue related to, I don't know, a lack of opportunities for myself or some of my colleagues, but it was a systemic issue. And this systemic issue was actually detrimental to the business because that's also something I could feel intuitively, is that in our modern economies, what counts is not so much the quality of your product or your service. It is the connection, the link, the connection you can establish or not with your customer base, or your ecosystem in general, even your suppliers, etc. And these connections are possible if you include in the corporate brain, in the decision making bodies, people who look like, who feel like, who have the same experience as your customers or your suppliers, or etc. So it's this diversity is not just a nice to have, good looking for corporate, booklets, kind of aspects. It is critical for the business itself. And that realization came to me in around 2010. And then I wrote a letter to the CEO of the company to advocate for diversity for the sake of our business. And this letter became viral. And it was not because the CEO sent it, but because I had sent it myself to three colleagues of mine, and they forwarded it to, and that it became viral. And that was the beginning of a movement where we decided together, without being prompted by anybody, without, no leader, etc. It came from us, and we decided that we would contribute to the organization. We would not fight against, we would fight for. And that was a very, very different mindset right from the start. And so it was fueled with positive energy, with people going across hierarchical barriers, functional barriers, people who did not know each other before but felt they were united by this purpose, this common purpose. Men and women, because very early on we realized we should be as diverse as what we preached, right, ourselves. So it was not about building a new silo like a women's group, for example. It was about enabling this diversity we were aspiring to. We thought, maybe we have a part of the solution. Maybe it will not come from by magic from somebody else, a senior leader, a CEO, etc. And that was for me really a revelation. The power of self-empowerment, of connection, of digital networks, because we used that. I mean, that was a super important enabler of our movement, the use of enterprise social networks. And all that was around 2011. So it's still very early for the kind of company I was at, which was absolutely not used to that type of groups, of movements. And at the beginning, we were watched with suspicion. Even the unions, looked at us with suspicion, said, "What are you doing? Who are you? Who's the boss?" And we said, "Well, there's no boss. We're a network. We're a community." All those new words, coming in the landscape, and it became a pretty big group, 3,000 people, that over 50 countries, that grew beyond the boundaries of the company even, and formed a network of networks, and has now, so it's been a long time now, and it has now become an official advisor or advisory group to the French Ministry of Industry. And it has gotten lots and lots of awards, and so it's but for me, what was really fascinating in this experience was what I discovered as as a human being in this activism experience, how I was able to connect, very deeply with other people, and this trust we built, because we wanted it. We created something. We self-organized. I mean, there was so much learning in that involved, and connecting with the outside world, with other, through discovering Twitter and all those things, and connecting with thought leaders. It's been a huge, huge transformative moment for me and many others.
What you're sharing with us and teaching us right now is powerful wisdom. We have all looked around our workplace,
Yeah.
where we are employed, and have seen some kind of condition we
Mm.
felt did not serve us or the people around us. And
Yes.
what you're sharing is you didn't just wake up in the morning on a Tuesday and say, I think I'll become an employee
No.
activist today. You thought, I see something that isn't working for me. It's
Mm.
not working for the people around me.
Yeah.
What am I going to do about it? And
Exactly.
then you anchored it to business benefit. I
Exactly.
loved what you said about, fighting with and for the
Exactly.
business rather than against it. How do you illustrate the business benefit
Mm.
and then build a network of networks?
Exactly.
I really
Exactly.
appreciate what you said
Mm.
there about not trying to create a silo. This isn't about a
Mm.
rebel movement. This is there is something to gain. And
Mm.
yes, there were the naysayers and the laggards and the people who were
Yes.
suspicious about your motive.
Mm.
Over time, it proved out to be a
Yeah.
powerful uniting force, and you didn't wait for permission. That was the other
Nope.
message that stood out to me
Yeah.
from what you were sharing, which was you were the hero you wanted to see,
Mm.
and you weren't waiting for permission for someone else to say, Celine, could you be in charge of
Mm.
diversifying our business?
Exactly. And you see how these kind of initiatives have sometimes been digested by companies into employee resource groups, which are super interesting and super important, but who tend to create new silos. You're either in the women ERG or in the, um, whatever other ERGs. And because an organization tends to reproduce what it knows,
Mm-hmm.
and apply it to the newness, to what's new. What's new is being digested into a structure with a hierarchy, a lead, some reporting work, some whatever, And by doing so, an organization limits its capacities for change, unfortunately. So at that time, there were no such things as employee resource groups, and we were more like, probably, how can I say, triggering more change than what, employee resource group members might be able to do now. Maybe not, but maybe, well, that's what I suspect. And about your this connection to business, yes, that is the critical point, probably. In addition to, the energy that is dormant and that can be revived, or that can be expressed, yes, by connecting it to, but this connection to business is key. And as long as I was involved in a diversity movement, unfortunately, it did not appear as a business a critical topic. You and I know it is, but for some of the old-fashioned, a bit maybe senior executives, it isn't. We have to face the truth. Huh? It doesn't look like it is an important topic. It looks like more of an identity, kind of topic. It's not. But anyway, so I was determined to show the business value of this kind of approach. And so I advocated very seriously. I built a business plan. I documented myself. I pulled together lots of sources, etc. Uh, and managed, after a while, it took 6 months, to create a position connected to marketing, the marketing department. And this position was called stakeholder engagement. It was the first ever position called as such within this whole big company, 100,000 people. And that was in 2012. Stakeholder engagement. It was the very beginning of stakeholder marketing, even in the field of research. And but I know it was promising. I know this was, where in the world of networks and ecosystems, etc. And so I managed to create from that position an initiative aimed at supporting the launch of a new product by connecting a worldwide community of stakeholders, diversity of stakeholders, because diversity is key in those initiatives. And I managed to, using such social networks, using the power of purpose, using the power of diversity, by connecting with different partners beyond the field of healthcare where I was operating. I managed to create this community of 250,000 people in less than a year. It got many awards as well. It got the attention of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, etc. It became a case study for e-health by the World Health Organization. And I was proud and happy about that. I think, well, in my opinion, I had proven the point, but in the company, some people still disagreed because they were pretty uh, afraid or a bit scared and challenged. They were challenged by this way of operating in a network, opening up to dialogue with stakeholders from all over the world, rather than channeling content or channeling messages to people, which is the comfortable, classical, controlled kind of way. I think this is old fashioned. This doesn't work anymore with clients, you know, we resent authority, we resent being talked to, we challenge um, experts, um, even knowledge, even science. And companies need to adapt to that. We need to find new ways. So that was my second experiment, and that led me to a third, which is why I moved to Boston, to the US, where I led the transformation of our whole quality, not the quality department, but the transformation of how people work together in order to produce better quality products. So that was a big global project involving close to 10,000 people worldwide across very, very different cultures. And again, I applied this very same approach: activism, networking, diversity, inviting people to co create, etc. And guess what? It worked again. It was quite amazing.
Did you know that 68% of workers say a hybrid workplace is their preference? Make hybrid work for everyone with Robin. Robin is the industry-leading flexible workplace platform for connecting people with rooms, desks, and each other. We've helped companies like Peloton, Toyota, and Hulu build better workplace experiences. Plus, we integrate with the tools you already know and love. To learn more about how we make flexible work a reality, visit www.robinpowered.com.
You also, in addition to the activism and network of networks, you used a word a moment ago that I think is critical, which is patterns. I mean, what you're describing is you created a pattern interrupt in the way things have always been done.
Yes.
And that reminds me of a conversation we had in our Authority Magazine interview. And you said people resent, to use that word from a moment ago, people resent a poor work experience, or they learn to conform and reproduce on others the patterns of domination they experience. What is it going to take to break this cycle and move organizations and employees within them from what I call organizations of blending to organizations of belonging?
Oh, that's a great wording. That's a great way to put it. I think it will take the awareness, a greater awareness to new possibilities or other possibilities. And by doing this podcast, you're contributing exactly to this. You're showing, you're making it possible for people to see other ways. There are other ways. We always have more power than we think. We don't have to follow, execute all orders or even what we believe is expected from us. We have the possibility to take risks sometimes. I did take risks. Uh, so I know I was able to take them. Well, first, I'm an optimist, so sometimes I underestimate the risks. I'm aware of that. I also realize that I speak from a position of privilege. I'm able-bodied. Yeah, I'm healthy. I'm a white woman. I'm not struggling with life really. So I am able. But I also have this also gives me a responsibility, mm, to push the needle a little bit. If I don't do it, then who will? And not to say that I will save the world. On the contrary, because that's the danger a little bit that looms for change agents. Sometimes, and I have certainly fallen in that trap myself before. Sometimes change agents want to save the world or save others. The problem with that is that in doing so, they only reproduce the current system where we put some people in charge and everybody else waits for the savior to save them, right? So we don't develop our agency, our self motivation, our self our awareness of our own strength. And this is comfortable for those who use that passivity. mm, and there's a lot of interest in keeping us in the back seat, or keeping us, as an audience, as a passive audience of consumers. This consumerism is, I suppose, interesting for business. But there are other ways, and those other ways are more fulfilling for us as human beings, for us as collectives of humans in the workplace, and in society in general. I think being this passivity that is entrenched, and this desire to, or the will, the belief that organizations will be more efficient if people just obey and march. This belief is leading us to catastrophe, to disasters. And to solve global warming, to solve the crisis of democracies, etc., we'll need the energy, the creativity, and the involvement of everybody, not just a few saviors.
Your new book, in fact, is an invitation to dare to unlead. What does it
Yes.
mean to unlead?
Ye-
And maybe what do we need to unlearn to unlead? Tell us more.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great point. I think we need to probably unlearn the traditional understanding or classical understanding of what leadership is. We all, if I say the word leader, I will, even myself, imagine this um, sort of exceptional person, probably somebody who's quite assertive and certain of his or her abilities, and who's a bit superior to us all. Somebody who's standing above, and who has followers. Okay, leader and followers. That's the traditional. Yeah, exactly. That's the traditional understanding of what a leader is. And I believe this has, I mean, it's probably deep rooted in human psyche. And it's time to let go of that and realize that perpetuating this pattern will only lead us to destruction. Instead, what we need to do is consider leadership as a collective capacity. Leadership is collective or is not. Mm? And if we are not able to develop this collective leadership, then there's no leaders. There's only autocrats. and uh, and so it's a collective capacity, in my opinion, and therefore it relies on relational capacity from a technological standpoint. So using all sort of connection technologies, but connection skills as well, connection abilities. So nurturing those skills, developing them as much as possible. This is, connection skills are the new engineering skills, right? And developing the social capital, nurturing the social capital of an organization, big or small, doesn't matter, at any scale, is critical. And for that, it requires people, individuals, especially people in position of power, to make the effort to sort of disappear in the collective rather than stand above it. And that's not easy because then you need to,
Someone listening right now is
yeah,
saying, the naysayers are going to say, well, first of all, we're a business that makes a
yeah,
profit. So something has to get done and somebody has to be in
yes.
charge. What would you say to that naysayer, or perhaps many of them that are
I would
listening?
I would say currently, your model relies on too few shoulders. You're putting too much work on too few shoulders. You have much more potential, much more capability than you think and then you leverage. You can actually do much more faster, better, etc. More innovation, etc. Instead of having, a few leaders drag the whole team, the whole organization, the rest of, and you know how it goes. Leaders complain about people below them being too passive, and people below them complain about leaders not listening, being detached from reality. So the blame game is probably the most played game in organizations. And then R&D will complain about marketing will complain about production, etc., etc., and it goes on. And instead, what I suggest, and I've seen it in practice, that's why it's not just, concepts, ideas, or ideals. It comes from doing it on the field. It's because I've seen it work that I now try to offer those pathways to other people through this book. It is in practice what works better. One of the examples I bring forward in the book is this transformation of quality, where we were able, thanks to the involvement of thousands of people, to solve problems that had not been solved for 15 years, despite millions invested, millions of dollars, despite tons of consultants, experts, etc. But all this investment, this money and brain power had not changed the patterns of relationships. They always had maintained this pattern where knowledge, expertise is supposed to come from the top and drip down, onto cascade down onto people, and it's based on the fantasy that people will adopt, execute, and change because they are told. They are told to. It never happens this way. This is a complete nonsense.
Yes, I say people are looking for meaning rather than mandates.
Exactly.
And when you tell a toddler what to do or a trained professional what to do, the same force rises up
Yes.
inside and comes out as you can't
Yes.
make me.
Exactly.
Right? It sparks
Yes.
this force of resistance.
Yes.
And you talk about the importance of relational leadership. What does that mean, or what should we be screening
Mm.
leaders for now? I mean, if we're writing the job description
Yeah.
for the most effective leader of our time,
Mm.
what characteristics and attributes or even
Yes.
experience would we be seeking to
Mm.
put this relational leader, this unlead leader in place?
Yes. Well, it's a hard question because power changes people. So you take the best person, we're not perfect, but imagine there's a perfect person and you put him or her at the top of a large organization. This person will be changed by power. So it is, rather than seeking profiles or specific profiles, I would pay attention to the conditions in which those people are expected to operate, or what they are how they are expected to relate with others. Of course, you can identify big egos and sort of um, refrain from choosing them, um, but it's hard again, because this assertiveness and confidence projects, it plays with what we have deep inside us as the image of the perfect leader. So it takes us, hiring people, but even all of us, voters, to deconstruct maybe what we expect from leaders. But in addition, and to respond maybe more directly to your question, why don't we look at how those people um, connect on social media, for example? Do they, or don't they? And if they don't, why? I think nowadays it should be, at least having a LinkedIn, profile, and interacting with other people should be the very minimum. Um, how do they relate to people uh, below them in the hierarchy? Do they pay attention, or do they pay attention to the next level only? Huh? Or are they still kind of stuck in this pyramid hierarchical mode, which is not very which is obsolete and not full of opportunities, unfortunately? Or are they in a networked kind of approach? What are their networks, and what are the communities they belong to? Do they feel they are part of it? How do they contribute to communities? That would be interesting. In order to pick some of the volunteers we invited to co-lead some of the projects I'm talking about, especially the quality one, and some others I did at clients. We invite people we actually select people on the basis of anonymized applications. And this is great because you're not influenced by who they are, where they live, how they look like, but you're paying attention to their answers to questions such as, what is leadership for you? Do you get involved in collective projects? Which ones? What do they bring you? What do you bring to them? Etc. etc. These kind of questions, I think, are extremely important for even to select leaders, and should be at the center of our leader selection, of our leader hiring process. Really, I think that would work.
The new leadership screening questions, those
Yes.
are fantastic. And you used a word in there I want to come back to, which is community. And
Mm.
the same Authority magazine series that brought you and I together, I interviewed almost 800 leaders about this topic of reworking work. And what struck me after all those conversations is that we've reached an inflection point of companies as command and control entities to
Mm.
companies as communities. That's what
Mm.
employees are really saying they want. My company
Mm.
to be a community, a place where I feel a sense of identity, belonging, purpose,
Mm.
trust, contribution. How do organizations create community
Mm.
leaders, inside of the
Yes.
organization? Because for some organizations listening, that's a very new concept.
Yes, it's a very new concept, absolutely. And some organizations believe that since they are an organization, so since they have a boundary, then they are naturally a community. They're already a community. But it's wrong. They are an organization, they are a structure, but they are not a community. A community is a process. A community is not a geography, it's not a territory, it's a process, it's an experience. And it relies on the integration of diversity, the experience of commonality, the integration of diverse perspectives, the open invitation to anyone, because a community is not an elitist group. That's if you imagine having a kind of leadership and some people better than others, etc. You just reproduce the old system. As I said about activist networks being transformed into ERGs, it's a little bit the same. So a community takes efforts from leaders to step down as the sole, uh, how can I say, leaders again, or the sole people who will direct the group. So it takes them to share power, to invite, to be open, to have their minds changed by those very people. That's what community is about, and it takes, in my opinion, a very strong um, magnet or glue. What keeps the community get together is this activist purpose. So constantly making sense together of what the world is, what we need to do, and why, and not taking a why, for as something that's now written on the wall and that we won't change, and we'll live the next 15 years with that why established by our board. this is this is wrong. This is the old world in practice. So we need a much more conversational, activist and open type of engagement with people. But of course, again, we said before, it takes new behaviors from leaders and from everyone, any one of us. It's not just leaders making efforts. It's also, some people are very comfortable in waiting for instructions and just, nothing more. And now we're inviting them to step in and co-create. So it takes efforts and learning and new skills from everybody.
Communities and co-creation. I love it. And our listeners are a community and they would like to get to know you a little bit better. I think about this as our virtual water cooler segment, the place of spontaneous conversation. So I've got 5 quick and easy questions for you. Just say the first thing that comes to mind. Are you ready to join our virtual water cooler here?
I am. Love that.
What time of day do you do your best work?
Oh, at night, for sure, for sure. After dinner, when everybody's, my kids, my husband are in bed or doing their own stuff, and I can do like 9 p.m. to 1 a.m., no problem. I got good music. I've got my, warm tea, my nice light, and I love that time of the day, of the night.
I share that with you. I'm
Oh,
also a
you
night owl.
do? Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, for sure. If there were no dress code, what would you wear to work?
Flip-flops.
A night owl and a beach bum. You and I are like soul sisters. Although I can't speak in the Vietnamese language. So, what is the part of your daily routine that you most look forward to each day?
Uh, I look forward to drinking my first tea in the morning. I drink enormous amount of tea every day, and it's always green tea, but different sorts of green tea, and I love the first one. It's really, really good.
Something special about that
Yes.
moment, right? If you could do any job in the world, what would you do?
Oh, I would read. I would read the whole day long. That's not really a job, that's an occupation. I don't know if I could be ever paid for reading, but I would just, yeah, read, 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 read.
Maybe you become a part of Goodreads, right? The
Yes,
reading
yes,
community, you're going to read the
yeah,
books and review them. Who knows?
yeah, yeah.
All right. Imagine a situation where now each day has 25 hours instead of 24. How would you spend that extra hour?
Well, then I would read an hour per day, which I'm not doing now.
I love it.
I
I
would make
love
sure to
it.
save that precious additional hour for sure.
Before we close, where can our listeners connect with you?
They can connect with me on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Instagram, basically on my website, obviously, weneedsocial.com. And I'm always here for a chat, always, I'm curious about people. So if anyone's curious about me, well, welcome. Let's chat.
And what is the one unlead behavior that you believe would forever shift work for the better?
It's questioning our own contribution to maintaining or changing systems. What do I do that keeps the system in place or changes it?
Well, thank you to Celine Schillinger, CEO of We Need Social and author of Dare to Unlead, for conferring strategies to move from command and control companies to companies as communities today on Success from Anywhere, because success is not a destination or a location. Success is available to anyone, anytime, anywhere.